History has recorded very few people who lived a life like Cleopatra. She was not just a pharaoh, but an empress. She was an incredibly special woman who will never be forgotten. I think her story will touch you deeply. This video tells about Cleopatra, the most powerful woman in history, who was even forced to marry her 13-year-old brother to achieve her goal. A woman who was able to rule an empire in a completely male world and shake governments with just one word. I'd rather talk about Cleopatra, and you decide for yourself whether Cleopatra was a powerful woman or a traitor. If you're ready, let's start the mysterious story of Cleopatra. Before watching this video, be sure to become a member of the channel and subscribe. Support us by liking this video and continue to stay with the Secret Box channel. First of all, who was Cleopatra? Born in early 50 BC, Cleopatra was the last ruler of this kingdom. Her son Caesarion, who gave her mother the title of the last pharaoh. One of the most powerful women in history, Cleopatra brought stability and prosperity to Egypt during her 50-year reign. Of all the rulers of Egypt, Cleopatra was perhaps the only one who received the best education. Cleopatra was the only queen of Egypt who could read and write and could speak 8 other languages. Cleopatra was never shy about using her intelligence and talent in front of men. She used her beauty and charm to impress the most powerful men in the Western world, and Cleopatra's rise to the throne is likely due to Cleopatra's parents being siblings. After the death of her father, Cleopatra married her own brother Ptolemy XIII in order to gain the throne and gain power. In a short time, due to the moves that Cleopatra makes to achieve her own desires, a civil war breaks out between these siblings, and Ptolemy XIII expels Cleopatra from Egypt. On the other hand, after the defeat of Greece in 48 BC, Pompey the Great decides to flee to Egypt. When Pompey arrives in Alexandria, the civil war continues, and Ptolemy XIII orders Pompey to be killed as soon as Pompey arrives in Alexandria, and Pompey is killed. Caesar, who has come to Alexandria following Pompey, is angry upon hearing the news of Pompey's death, and negotiations begin to end the civil war. Before the negotiations, Cleopatra meets Caesar and captivates Caesar with her charm. Therefore, Caesar gives Cleopatra concessions during the negotiations by setting conditions in favor of Cleopatra. Cleopatra and Caesar. Cleopatra first met Caesar when she was 22 years old and had heard that the Roman ruler liked powerful women. When they were negotiating the civil war, Cleopatra had already won Caesar over and made him fall in love with her. Cleopatra's relationship with Caesar began in 47 BC. They soon had an illegitimate child, and the following year in 46 BC, Cleopatra moved into Caesar's palace. Caesar held a celebration for Cleopatra in Rome. Caesar erected a statue of Venus in the temple and placed a golden statue of Cleopatra next to it. The Roman people did not like Caesar's actions. However, some historians believe that Caesar did not love Cleopatra or even loved her. According to this theory, Caesar wanted to conquer Egypt, and he certainly had the opportunity during the Civil War. But conquering Egypt meant that in order to rule Egypt, the ruler had to be based in Egypt. Caesar knew that if Egypt were annexed to Rome, whoever ruled Egypt would have the same power as the ruler of Rome. So Caesar decided that he could not put Rome in such a danger. For this reason, he had a son with Cleopatra and named him Caesarion. In this way, one day this boy became the king of Egypt, and Caesar hoped that he could control Egypt through his son. According to this theory, Mark Antony also followed Caesar's plan. Perhaps when Rome needed Caesar, Mark Antony arranged for Caesar to be in Egypt. However, Caesar learned a lot about Egyptian science and culture during this time. When he returned to Rome, he reorganized the calendar, conducted a census, made plans to build a public library for the people, and presented numerous projects.
The death of Caesar and Cleopatra was in Rome. After Caesar's death, Caesar and Cleopatra went to Egypt and waited for the civil wars to subside. Caesar's loyal friend and famous commander, Mark Antony, chooses Caesar's nephew Octavian as his heir, and with Cleopatra's support, finally stops the wave of opposition that Caesar's assassins have created and restores peace to Rome. Cleopatra and Mark Antony. When the First Civil War ends in 41 BC, Mark Antony decides to visit Alexandria. Even while Caesar was alive, Cleopatra and Mark Antony had been rumored to be having an affair, and when Mark Antony arrived in Egypt, his affair with Cleopatra, which would effectively spell the end of Cleopatra, officially began. Just a year later, the affair bore fruit, and Cleopatra gave birth to Mark Antony's twins. But Mark Antony had married Octavian's sister, and this marriage had strengthened the bond between Mark and Octavian. But with the entry of Cleopatra into Mark Antony's life, he divorces his wife and shortly marries Cleopatra, and they have another child. Octavian does not like this at all. Over the years, Mark Antony moves away from Rome, devoting himself to his wife and the hobbies she has brought him. Mark Antony becomes more dependent on Cleopatra every day and carries out her orders more and more. Alexandria's gifts. Mark Antony wants to give some of the lands he has conquered in the name of Rome to Cleopatra and her children. This event, which takes place in 35 BC, makes Octavian very angry. Mark Antony holds celebrations and grants titles to Cleopatra and her children. Cleopatra is given the title Queen of Kings and Queen of Egypt. Mark Antony sends these requests to the Senate, which quickly rejects them. Octavian demands that this be stopped, and the last war of the Roman Empire begins. The last war of the Roman Empire and the death of Cleopatra. In 32 BC, Octavian declares war on Cleopatra after deposing Mark Antony in Rome. Cleopatra is defeated in a naval battle in 31 BC. In 30 BC, Octavian enters Egypt and defeats Mark Antony's forces. This causes Mark Antony to commit suicide. Mark Antony dies in Cleopatra's arms. On the other hand, Cleopatra poisoned herself when she heard that Octavian was planning to take her to Rome as a war trophy. Cleopatra's death is still a matter of debate. Some sources say that Cleopatra deliberately provoked a snake to bite her. However, Cleopatra died suddenly, and if she died from a snake bite, it would have taken a long time to die. The ancient historian Strabo said that Cleopatra always carried a poisonous hair comb with her, so she probably killed herself with this poisonous hair comb. Cleopatra was looking for a place to rule in a world where the Romans were seeking to conquer all lands. Cleopatra did everything in the best interests of her people, reforming the bureaucracy, almost eliminating bribery, revolutionizing taxation, and raising the standard of living of her people. In 2007, an ancient coin was found with the image of Cleopatra dating back to 32 BC. According to the image on the coin, Cleopatra has an ordinary appearance and is not as beautiful as she is described and depicted in books and films. Cleopatra's excessive influence was not due to her appearance. As the famous Roman historian Plutarch said, Cleopatra was more intelligent and knowledgeable than beautiful, and Cleopatra's voice was like a musical instrument with several strings that could produce any vibration she wanted and use any language she wanted. Lindsay Allison Jones, director of the Museums of Antiquities at Newcastle University, where the ancient coin is on display at the university's museum, said, "Roman writers wrote about Cleopatra's intelligence, charm, and beautiful voice, without mentioning her physical beauty. He also said that in recent years, the beautiful and seductive image of Cleopatra presented in this Cleopatra was not the beauty that brought others to their knees, but her intelligence and wit." Thank you very much for being with us until the end of this video. If you like this sample video, be sure to like the video and share it with your friends, and be sure to write your comments in the comment section. Thank you.